the realization, if you want to call it a rationalization, you could probably do that too, but
Right.
It's my truth about this is that ultimately, no matter where you're placing talent,
Right.
when you place talent, you're growing a business.
Right.
And if you're growing a business, it's kind of that rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
That's going to impact the
Agreed.
workers here in the US as well, enrich them, their families, etc., and also open up more opportunities as they continue to grow. So if you're a US company, what you're faced with over the next 10 years is a skills gap where you don't have the people to fill the roles for your company to grow.
Interesting.
It's not a matter of picking and choosing where you want to hire.
Right.
It's a matter of where you're going to be able to find talent in the first place.
Wow, man. MyCORE is on a mission to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I invite you to join me as we deep dive into the personal and professional lives of our guests. We're going to learn who they are, why they exist, and what they do. We're going to hear their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, we're going to talk to some really cool people. Welcome to the MyCORE Podcast. Alrighty, hello. Welcome to the MyCORE Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I am excited for conversation number 3 with my main man, Pierce, in the house. Pierce, thank you for being here. Now, you live, 5-10 minutes from here?
Yeah, roughly. Add maybe 4 hours and 15 minutes, but yeah, it's close.
Dude, I really appreciate you being here. It's 10:40 in the morning. We've been hanging out here for a few minutes, just kind of warming up our conversation. But tell me about your drive in this morning. And the reason I ask is, one, I want to thank you for being here, but also I think the way that people start their day, the content that they fill their mind with, the mind space that they get in, and then sometimes just like going and showing up, right? Like we could have done this episode over Zoom, but one, I plan to do all of them in person, so we wouldn't have. And secondly, I'm just kind of curious, like day in the life. And does your wife think you're crazy for getting up at whatever time you got up and driving here to sit on the couch and talk with me?
Yeah. So the tale of this morning differs very much from the typical day. Right. So the excitement of getting up here and joining you on this conversation definitely had me up a little bit earlier than I normally would, plus the drive and all that. So I ended up this morning waking up at 3, and I was like,
oh wow.
I was like, dang it, it's way too early.
Yeah.
Tried to get back to sleep, but the excitement was too much. So I got out of bed around 3:30, had my coffee, tuned into a couple other podcasts just for some inspiration, and just that's also part of the morning routine normally.
Cool.
But yeah, it was really just getting ready, cleaned up, getting up here. But in a typical morning, I've got something that I call the perfect morning, although I think most people would say it's insane. Then
you add kids to it in life.
Well, the cool thing is my kids thankfully sleep pretty well now. I've got a 5-year-old daughter and an 18-month-old daughter. Nice. The 5-year-old has slept great from like the earliest stages. As soon as she was in her crib, she was 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Lucky man.
Always, right? And has been that way ever since. Then our 18-month-old, it took her 13 months to get into that kind of groove. Okay. So we're just now, coming up for air. But
doesn't it feel like, it sounds like you got lucky there with your oldest daughter, but you get in the grind of parenting and you just create new norms. And one of those new norms is like not sleeping a lot, or, rolling over and like being like, oh, I almost like fell over on my kid. You're just kind of uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
And then they hit a stage where they sleep through the night. And our son, Levi, he'll be 2 next week. And most nights he wakes up, get him a bottle, bring him into bed. He's also our youngest. So I'm even having that little like, oh my gosh, is this the last time? Like, are we going to be done with diapers? Like, we're not going to have diapers because we've been
that hits you.
years of straight, kid babies and young toddlers. But the other night it was almost weird. Like I wondered if maybe I slept through him coming into the bed and then him leaving. And she's like, my wife, Jen, is like, No, he just slept through. I'm like, weird.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a mind-blowing moment, I'm sure. You just have a sixth kid, dude.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no worries.
That's how my parents were, I think. They just kept, I mean, I'm the fourth of 9. They just kept going, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so you're saying?
Yeah, no, we're at a place of more normalcy in terms of the routine now.
Cool.
And so I'm slowly but surely getting back into that perfect morning groove.
Nice.
And it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I had to like work back, like, okay, if I'm going to get the girls up by 20 after 7, like how many minutes am I going to allocate to each thing? Therefore, I need to wake up at this time. And that wake up time is 4:30.
You get up at 4:30?
Well, no.
Okay.
In a perfect morning, I wake up at 4:30.
Okay, cool.
And for a while, I had that going, especially during COVID. But then when the kids came around, that was like a total disruptor. And so I haven't been as religious with it as I should be, but I'll get back because it definitely has a significant impact if I do follow it.
Yeah.
And so what that looks like for me is first things first is coffee. Get myself some water in the system, but then it's a little bit of reading, a little bit of meditation. So the reading is Old Testament chapter, New Testament chapter. Nice. Kind of get my spirit nurtured first thing out. That's probably great. The most important part for me. Just sets a tone for some positivity throughout the day and just thinking about things in the right framework. Yeah. And then I'll do a chapter of reading on a personal side, whether it's professional development or something funny or something that's exciting. Yeah. The meditation piece, I cannot advocate highly enough about meditation.
Dude, I talk to me about that because, I've had a pretty real relationship with God since I can remember. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, and I can remember saying the prayer of salvation and like really feeling like I like had a personal relationship with God and Jesus since I was like 8, 9, 10. And I have a whole story on that journey, but I say that to say that meditating, whether it's through a, biblical lens or a different view, I struggle with, man. Like, I think my thoughts are constantly racing. Mm-hmm. I'm an overthinker. I'm probably like undiagnosed ADHD. Mm-hmm. And like many entrepreneurs, I'm kind of a million miles a minute. So do you find yourself like actually getting into like a state of Zen, or is it more like a deterrent from losing your shit? Like I can't speak to meditation because I don't do it. I never have done it. Even prayer is tough for me. Like really getting in prayer,
and doing it. Yeah.
Because I'm a thinker, so I'm constantly in my head, but I do it like integrated throughout my day, and I don't love it because I will be solving a problem while playing, catch or soccer with my son, and he'll say something and I'm like, I have no idea what you just said, and I hate that about myself. Yeah. But I struggle with it. I haven't quite figured that out. But I was just curious, like, I wanted to ask you, like, what does that mean? Are you crossing your legs, crisscross applesauce, and going like this? What does meditating look like?
Yeah, no. So
because everyone says it, but I'm like, you really meditate? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, what I would recommend to you and anyone else watching is, no paid promotion here. It's just something I genuinely get a lot of value from. But it's an app called Calm.
Yeah. I've heard of Calm.
And so it's 10 minutes.
Okay.
Sometimes it goes a little longer, but right around that 10-minute mark, and it coaches you through it. It's got the kind of ambient sort of music going on in the background too. Every day is a different sort of application of meditation, different types of breath work, things like that. But ultimately, it also coaches you because throughout the meditation, it'll tell you if your thoughts are getting in the way. Do not judge yourself. Oh, cool. Just remind yourself to come on back and focus on the breath. And so there'll be some sessions or Holmes, I'm literally every 2 seconds having to call myself back. And that's okay, right? And what I found is even in those more disrupted sessions, my sense of peace throughout the day is markedly better. But really the cool thing is I find that my short-term memory and recall is incredible. like I'll pull things in a business conversation later in the day, and it's like, that ain't me. That is not the power of my brain working. But I mean, you throw meditation as it kind of in there, and it kind of.
And I can attest, like in the way, and I'd love to talk about how we met, how we connected. Give a shout out to Cheryl for connections.
So Cheryl,
she's a master connector, man.
Totally.
Have you read The Tipping Point?
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's one of my favorite books. Malcolm Gladwell. I was actually talking with Kenya Adams in our last episode, conversation number 002, about Malcolm Gladwell, his book Outliers. But my first love was the Tipping Point. I read that in college, and it actually ironically made me not want to go to college anymore. But she is that profile in the book where he talks about the connector. So in our conversations, not being recorded, but just interacting over the past, probably been a year now, right?
Yeah.
You would remember things and say things. And I thought, there are two types of people in life: people that have read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and people that have not. And this is a guy that has. So I appreciate that attention to detail. It certainly makes me feel important, and I'm sure the other people that you interact with. I mean, our team just fell in love with you in Minneapolis. We'll talk about that, and they're all stoked that we're doing this episode together. But do you attribute some of that to meditation? Like, are you saying that the more you're in those states and going through that work, you can recall some of the details of your conversations and interactions, or have you always sort of had that skill or that focus?
It's a bit of that. I would definitely say meditation helps. I would say there's a part of it that is focusing on my own personal imperfections, flaws, whatever you want to call them, where I know, like, I'm really bad with names, right? So there's a conscious effort on my part whenever I'm meeting somebody new to correct that.
Cool.
Focus on, repeating their name so I don't find myself in an awkward situation or make the person feel less valuable.
Right.
Because I've been in that situation. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And then the other component is just the genuine feeling in my own heart that people are valuable.
Yeah.
I don't care where they're at in their life or their careers or what have you. Like, there's inherent value, and I want them to know that I get it. And so that's just another sort of, effort on my part.
I think I'd love to talk about that for a second, because I think it's sort of known, whether you've been highly committed to the art and science of people or not, people love their name, right? It's their favorite word, right? It's music to their ears. And I think a lot of people struggle with this, right? And it's not necessarily because they don't care or because they have short-term memory loss. I think it's because right in that moment when you meet somebody and interact for the first time, there's just some awkwardness around that, right? Like social awkwardness. So you're not really like keying in on the moment when they say their name. And I've found it, if I can build the discipline around it, I just like really block everything out and I get their name and I like use wordplay, or I'll try to commit it to memory. So it's clever and it's nice if you can do it. But I think there needs to be like a little bit more grace around not remembering it. And if you don't, what I've found, I'm curious if you find yourself doing this too, is just asking again. And you can even qualify it and sort of give context to it and say, hey, I really want to memorize your name and remember it. It's totally, I didn't catch it.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it starts with the letter, or like, and I'll do that sometimes. And then it actually will sort of create a almost like a little mini vulnerable moment where they go, I have no idea what your name is. Yeah. I'm like, oh, it's Nathan, and yours. And they're like, Pierce. And I'm like, good to meet you, man. So I think sometimes people like really stress that. And then they're freaking out going, I have no idea what this person's name is. I've been talking to him for 20 minutes. It's like, just ask them. Would you agree? Like, do you do that, or how do you get around it?
I don't. I get around it in the most awkward ways possible. Nice.
But
what your point your point is well taken in that it takes somebody who's really confident and comfortable in their own skin to have that vulnerability with somebody.
Right.
And I'll tell you, if you go through that exercise with somebody, you won't forget that name again, because now you've got a personal connection with them, a funny moment.
Right.
They're not going to forget yours either.
Right.
And that's the beginning of a really cool relationship potentially.
Yeah.
So
I've found that to be true. Yeah. Just like keeping it real. Because if you try to gamify it and you do the things like, like it comes off cheesy too, but if you're like, remind me how you spell it. Is your name spelled? Or you try to do these like, and they're like, yeah, it's SAM. It's Sam. You know,
dude,
like,
when I tell you in introductions, because that's when it comes up the most, it's like you're just having this conversation. I got another funny story about names too in a second. But someone else will come up that you know,
right.
and you want to make the introduction. Like, yeah, you should meet, instead of saying, you know, who they are and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like it's so like transparent. People get like, you don't know my name. And it's like, okay, I got to do better.
Well, here's a question, because I asked my wife essentially like, hey, if I ever introduce you and say your name and not theirs.
Oh, that's slick. I know where you're going. Yeah,
I need you to get their name like
vocally. I don't
know it, and I'm setting it up to get it.
Yeah.
So we have like a little, like I've done it. I don't even know if we've really gotten super clear about it, but she's good about it. Where like I'll be like, hey, let me introduce my wife. This is Jen, and then I just like block everything out. I'm like,
Jen, come on,
listening, yeah. And then what'll happen is they'll say like, nice to meet you, Jen, and I'm like, dang it, like. So I remember saying like, hey, can you get them to say their name? And they're like. Because you get a clean slate right there to get it, and then you're like, oh, damn, that's right, damn it, or whatever.
That's a slick move. I'm definitely stealing it. I like
it's pretty good nug. Yeah, you got to get like everyone on the same page.
I might even do it with other friends. Be like, hey, listen, hook me up when we're out networking. Like, I'm going to need you because I'm not good at this. Yeah, I know the other story was I lived in New York for about a year. Many years ago, I think it was like 2012 or something like that.
Nice.
And I was working for this
city.
What's that? Well, I lived in Brooklyn and worked in the city.
Okay.
And so I got this job, and it was day one, and I had like 32 teammates at the table for my first like sales meeting with the team. Yeah. And the boss, all of our bosses, he really great guy, knew his business well, really looked up to him, but he was tough. And meeting one, I'd like to introduce everyone to Pierce. He just joined our team, etc. Pierce, you want to introduce yourself? So I did, gave my little spiel. And then he's like, all right, tell me everyone's name in the room. And I was like, what?
32 people?
32 people day one, mid-afternoon. You're talking like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
You put you on the spot like that?
Dude, I froze. And what was really embarrassing was the first guy that he asked me to name, sitting right to his left, I was just talking to for like 15 minutes. Right. And he looks at me like, dude, you're a schmuck. Damn. And I was like, okay, this is horrible. So they went around the room. Everybody said their name. And I was like, all right, I got this. And I shit you not, all 32 I got.
Really?
It was that kind of moment where
it was that
like,
traumatic.
MJ wanted the ball when he had the flu. Like I was there, and I freaking won the game. So anyway, our boss, this guy Kevin, he was like, you wrote down the names, didn't you? I was like, no, I did not. I was like, I'm that good. No.
Yeah, I'm a G, man.
Yeah, so that was pretty funny.
I can't believe you did that.
Yeah, no, it was one of those really cool moments. But yeah, so that's going back to the whole routine thing. I would also say 45 minutes of exercise at least. Okay. If you can get in an hour, that's great.
And you do this all in the morning? I know it's your perfect day, but you get this all knocked out.
And I had several months where it was humming, and yeah, it's doable, especially if you get up early enough and you've got the time before the kids get up. Got to tweak it based on your own personal circumstances.
You know who's like exceptionally good at this is Laura.
Oh, really?
Laura from our team, Laura Selkin.
Yeah.
Dude, she's like clockwork, man. I mean, she wins the day before most of us wake up. I mean, I think she gets up at like, I don't know, but I'll just see like an email and it's timestamped for like 4:25 a.m. And she's on Central Time, so it's even earlier. In the sense of like how we're getting our day going. I mean, we're all over the country with MyCORE and Canada, but it's all kind of East Coast driven. So she's whooping our butt even with an hour prior.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah. I think that I bet if she were to be asked like, how were you successful as a mother a businesswoman, she'd probably say I like crush it in the morning.
Yeah,
So
man.
it sounds like morning's the magic. I struggle with this for years because I'm more of a night owl naturally.
Okay.
But I ripped the Band-Aid off about 6 months ago and started working out. I took the 5:30 a.m. class,
Okay.
and that was like rough. Like the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was just a zombie.
Yeah.
Like my workouts sucked. But then I think the secret sort of, it's not a secret, but the effect is you are tired enough in the evening to go to sleep,
get a good night's rest,
to get to bed,
Yeah, and then that kicks off the next day. I mean, usually we're in bed by 10:30.
Nice.
That helps a lot, and getting up. And I'm an early riser in the first place, so
okay, you are. Helps. So you've always been like this.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, man,
cool.
Always been.
I haven't, so it's been hard for me.
Yeah. Well, my wife is the opposite. She's the night owl and likes to sleep in. So, but yeah, so there's the exercise component. And then the real crazy part is when you start getting into other self-improvement stuff beyond the reading, beyond the meditation.
Okay.
And there's other cool tools out there to help you do it. So like one of them is I've got like brain games to fire up the synapses upstairs to just get you mentally sharp. Quick Sudoku game. Nerdy as that might sound, I like it, and it helps me feel like I'm getting a little bit sharper. And then
so this is almost like mental exercise that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the last piece that I definitely have not spent enough time, even when things were humming, this was probably the thing that got most neglected, is pick up Babbel and try to like just dive into a different language.
Damn, man.
That to me is, if you can knock all that out, the rest of the day is pretty much cake, because your mind is just ready for it.
Yeah.
Your emotional state is ready for whatever's coming your way. And so, yeah.
I like talking about this for a couple of reasons. One, because I have a handful of philosophies that I live by that have served me, that kind of are on repeat, broken record in my head, live rent free. One of them is that successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do.
Yeah.
And it's such a simple thing. And I was recently teaching it to my kids. They didn't want to go to church, and they never do. They're kids, right? So they're just like, no, I don't want to get dressed. And our church starts pretty early, actually, 9:30 a.m. So we're on a Sunday morning, getting up by 8, getting going, getting out the door. It kind of pays off because then you can hit the beach earlier. But it's definitely like different than your normal like 11 a.m. service. So my daughter was like laying in bed. She didn't want to get out. She was laying in our bed while we're getting ready. And it was getting to like, Rosie, it's time to go. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do what I always do, which is give her unsolicited advice and coaching. Yeah. And I'm like, Rosie, I want you to repeat after me. And it was cute. She actually did repeat after me. Normally they're like, Dad, no one wants to hear that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We're not your, we don't work at your company. like, I don't mean to be like that, just, I don't know, just kind of always looking for opportunities to improve.
Sure.
So it was so cute to have her. And then my son, Judah, like in unison, they were repeating after me. I'm like, successful people do. And they're like, successful people do. What unsuccessful people are not willing to do. Now get your ass up and get ready for church.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it seems like those moments, I would imagine, as the alarm clock goes off, when you think about those like uncomfortable in the short term, but pays huge dividends in the long term, whether you say it that way or not to yourself, do you have an awareness around the fact that other people, most people, the average person is not doing that? And does that at all drive you to do it? Because it does for me. I don't know if that's like sick or something, but when I used to cut weight for wrestling and get up early and put trash bags on, I kept thinking about my opponent. And I'm like, there's no way that dude's doing this right now. It's 5 a.m. It's freezing out. This is up in Maryland in the winter. And I'm running around this, community with trash bags on. So I wondered if there's any like edge that you have around, like, there's no way other people are doing this right now. Or you just do it because you're a nice dude.
No, I think at least subconsciously there's a bit of that. Okay. I think it's also just understanding what you want out of life, and that there's going to be certain things that you're going to have to do that are a bit uncomfortable to get there.
Right.
And whether that's your health, whether that's your spirit, whether that's your business, Like there's all these places where you ultimately want to be. There's that place where you are, and that delta is only going to get closed, with doing the required work. And yeah, maybe a lot of people aren't doing it, but that's going to make their path a lot slower. Maybe they never get there.
Yeah.
And for me too, it's like, if I'm not there yet, and I'm not, like, there's more that I can be doing. You know what I mean?
I'd like to jump off on that a little bit, like dive into that. Let me give it like context. So I'm personally fascinated by wanting to do an entire podcast about the core of people, right?
Yeah.
Like what's really going on in there, because I think it's no mystery that people aren't always as they appear in either direction, right?
Yeah.
Like they might seem like they have it all together and they don't. They might seem like they don't have it together, but they kind of do, because they have it internally in the core of things. But, you can judge a tree by its fruit, right? So at some point, if you're getting it right internally in your philosophies and your habits and your thinking and your relationships, kind of just like in your core, it's a matter of time before it cascades out and it springs out,
Sure.
right? And that will show up in the results of your life, kind of basic cause and effect. But there's a huge time lapse between those things that I think our society today, particularly millennials, Gen Zs, we've grown up in a society where things are immediate, like immediate gratification, microwave, drive-through, cell phone. The amount of convenience that there is in the developed world, I think, is like possibly leading to our demise, right?
I can see it.
And then you've got AI, which is gonna just completely revolutionize this and take it to a whole nother level, quite possibly eliminating like entire jobs, like entire, vocations.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of weird, right? Because it's like, how do you navigate all of this? And something that I think you and I have in common, and the reason we've connected, is that I think we both recognize that the struggle is real, right? And that even though it might seem like we have it together, or it's going great, or it's been like smooth sailing, like that's not without an immense amount of pain and struggle. And yet you have to keep your dignity through all of it, right? So I learned early on, never let them see you sweat. I think that could be a dangerous thing, because that could be confused by like, don't be vulnerable, or, act as if, or fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm. But that's very different than like believing in where you're heading and recognizing that like, I'm in the middle right now. I'm in the suck. And I'd love to kind of go through a little bit of a timeline with you, because I find that people are that which they think they are, as a man thinketh, as a person thinketh. And sometimes the things that we are told about ourselves, or we tell ourselves about ourselves, we didn't make up. Like somebody else imposed that upon us, for better or for worse, right? So it could be a parent that spoke life. It could be a parent that spoke death. It could be a person that a lot of times, it's amazing to me how many people will look back over their lives and be like, my elementary school teacher said, and it's like, what? Like that changed the trajectory of your life because of your freaking second grade teacher, for better or for worse. Like they said, I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, or they said I was funny and now I'm so funny. It's like, man, like we have to be protective with our words. The Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue. Yep. So I'm kind of curious, like looking back, you're a stud. How old are you?
40.
Good for you, man. That's awesome.
That's what they tell old people.
I thought you were younger than me when we first met. I'm so excited that we're sitting down through this podcast, because you're very tall and it's not cool. But with my torso, I don't think anyone can tell if I just sort of sit up like this.
Don't tempt me, man. I'll start to...
just keep slumped. Stay slumped over there. But I'm kind of curious, like looking back over your 40 years, like, have you always been entrepreneurial? Have you always been like somebody that takes risk? Did something happen in your life? Like, let's go back through, you know, I don't have to necessarily go your whole life, but I want to know like little maybe moments, if you can recall any, that might have predisposed you to being this type of person.
Yeah. Wow.
Easy question, right?
Yeah, that's a deep dive.
Yeah.
I can think of a few things offhand, and then we'd have to probably get like a really good psychotherapist in there to,
right.
like,
you can lay on the
deeper.
couch.
Yeah, it's a good couch to lay on, man. Yeah, so I would say first things first, I'd have to credit my mom as the first sort of entrepreneurial force in my life. Just she had, a number of different pursuits, working with her father, who is a big inspiration for me. She really carried the financial burden on her back, bringing us up. And she was never one to just take whatever job, she felt like she was suited for. And she wasn't afraid to go out and start her own business. She took on multiple businesses to take care of making sure ends were met.
And this is at a time, not that, this was in the 1800s or something, but that was probably like pretty rare for a woman 30 years ago, I guess, as you were a child, to be like doing the deal as an entrepreneur. I would imagine compared to like your friends' moms, you weren't seeing that as much, or was that common in your community?
No, I mean, by and large, most of the moms of my friends were stay-at-home moms, or working a 9-to-5. And my mom was working, throughout the day, and then coming home and writing grants throughout the evening, taking care of us at dinner time and getting us to bed. But the woman was back to work right after that. Wow. And then she also showed me a lot of strength. She, as much as I love my dad, they were not good together. He wasn't the husband he should have been. And she had the strength to say, no, I deserve better than this, and to stand up for herself. And it's brought me to tears thinking about at times where just how hard that must have been with 2 kids, or really 3 kids. One was just older, but the 3 of us. And so, she was the first real inspiration as far as, valuing yourself, to not let anybody keep you down. Yeah. And then 2,
even the father of your children.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. With all the great things that he brought to the family, still, there were some really important things that she needed to have addressed that just were not, it didn't.
And that led to divorce?
It did. Yeah.
How old were you when that happened?
12, 13, thereabouts. Okay. Yeah.
That's a tough age.
Yeah, for sure. We were actually just talking about this morning, and how she worries, about, the decision she made. And I told her, look, you can't look at it in the micro, in terms of how the impacts were then. You got to look at it in the macro and hit the men we began.
And you stopped on your way here because you live, what part of Florida exactly are you in?
So I live in South Florida, in like close to Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale area.
So it's about 4 or 5 hours from here.
Thereabouts, yeah. And then my mom lives in the central part of the state, and it was a quick jump off 95 to say hello and give her a hug and show her some love. So yeah, we got to.
So you were with your mother this morning, and now we're talking about it. And you were just like fresh, like a couple hours ago, having some of these conversations or touching on the journey.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
Cool
and it's cool to be able to share this now, because I'm very proud of her. Yeah. And then outside of that, I grew up with and still struggle with a sense of sort of the imposter syndrome. Right. I've got really big ambitions in terms of what I want for my life and the life of my family. Yeah. And oftentimes find that I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the room, nowhere near. And so that has to be met with a sense of, I will outwork the others that are in the room to make up for the divide between, the smarts and, the smartest in the room and where I'm at. And so that early on kind of posed as an obstacle for me in terms of really seeing what I was capable of. And it wasn't until I had some inspirations in my life through like friendships, just saying, look, there's more out there that's possible. And then also I would say, now, like I said, we'd have to deep dive for all of the contributors to who I am today. But man, I definitely have to give a shout to my wife, who just, believes in me for the man that I am. And also just knows that everything that I want out of this life is attainable and supports it.
How long have you guys been together?
Gosh, man, we've been together 15 years, I think.
Cool. And married
7. It was a long courtship. No, so 14 years. We were together for 7 or 6, engaged for 1, and then married for 7 years now.
So you essentially grew up, you adulted together, right?
Absolutely.
You met at 25.
Oh yeah.
And from there from about the time you could rent a car to to being a grown ass man at 40, she's watched you grow, evolve, chase, strive, fall down, get back up.
Totally.
Yeah. So she's seen your time in grade.
Yeah.
And has never stopped believing in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, one other that I would say I need to shout out too is I actually, before I had my own children, kind of came into kind of pseudo fatherhood at an early age because my dad passed when I was 22.
Wow. So your parents divorced when you were 12, and 10 years later you lost your father. Yep. How did he pass?
Heart issues.
Okay.
He was 51. Wasn't
51?
Yeah, not taking good care of himself, and and it was just kind of one of those bricks to the head that happen in life sometimes. Really difficult, but you have to keep in mind, if I'm 22, then my younger brother is 18, just getting ready to go out into the world. And so it was through that very difficult time in our lives that I took on sort of the role of a dad / brother for him. And so what's been interesting is through that period of time, right, almost 20 years, we've kind of gone back and forth in terms of leaning on each other in a sort of father capacity. And I've been able to be there for him. And then when I'm at my very lows, he's been there as a voice in my ear that says, get off the ground, get up. And so those are probably the people that I'd have to give the most credit into who I am today, which is not nearly who I want to become, but definitely who I will become at some point.
I would challenge you in that statement, man. I have been observing people my whole life. I kind of always been fascinated by people, and it doesn't take long to find out if somebody has it or not, or is it or not. And I think you're the real deal, man. Really.
Thank you, man.
And you know what it is? It's little things like driving here, like I know the hours that I've put in to things that are seemingly insignificant in the act of doing them, but compounded over time make all the difference. And it kind of boils down to showing up, right? It's like showing up for the class, showing up for the moment, showing up for the podcast, showing up for the event like in Minneapolis. And that's just my point of view. But I have a feeling that if you go backwards, you've had a bunch of other moments like that where you've shown up, you've put yourself in the mix, you've put yourself in the game, you've put yourself in the room, even if you felt like you weren't the smartest one there, which, as we know, then you're in the right room, right? Yeah, you're in the wrong room. Absolutely. If you are the smartest one. Yep. If you're what I call the skinniest kid at fat camp, then it's a crude way to say it, but here's a story of my life on that note. And it drives me. I've always been the worst of the best. It's an odd space to live because I've always been at the top tier of everything. I wrestled Division I, but I didn't go to Iowa. I was ranked 25th in the country. I was a 2-time state finalist. I blew it twice in the finals. I'm 5'11", I'm like, what? Like one more inch and I could be 6 feet. Yeah. So it's like the story of my life is that I've always had to compete at the top tier because I'm good enough to play ball, whether it's literally sports or something else in life, with the best, but I get my teeth kicked in by the people that are truly talented. And then if I were to go down a notch and just dominate, I'm too good for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just feel like you're taking the easy path, right?
Yeah,
like I could have went and wrestled Division 2 or Division 3 and just dominated, but I went Division 1 and got my ass kicked. You know what I mean? Like every day. So I say that to say that, like, it takes one to know one, and I'm not saying that to puff my chest, but I'm a pretty confident guy in general, and I think you're a complete stud, dude. Like, I think whatever you do, you're gonna just crush it, and I'm stoked that we're finding inroads to work together. So I don't know. I just wanted to validate you. I wouldn't even like move the goalpost on that, because here's where I think, and I'm sure people listening can relate to this. Like, you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. Now, do we get free will? Of course. Is there an effect to the calls? Absolutely. I'm not suggesting that you just sit back and let go and let God entirely. But you're a father, you're a husband. First of all, that's winning. You know what I mean? Like, I damn near lost my family through divorce and reconciled with Jen, and we have our family now. And that was the hardest thing, way harder than building a business, way harder than wrestling or cutting weight or whatever, any of the other adversity. And I sort of consider that my greatest accomplishment, but I don't think of it that way, like a striving for something, but that is what's most important. I think that. Was there any better reward than having your family? Dude. Absolutely not. No. So that is your greatest achievement, man. Right. No doubt. And then retaining it, sustaining it, showing up for it every day, that I have to keep struggling through, right? Because when you're a driven person like yourself and myself, it's easy to just get tunnel vision and lock in on something, and you'll go through a season and be like, oh, damn, I wasn't very present, for that meal or for that day, or could even be for that month, because you're just like problem solving something around the clock, especially if you're in like a tough moment. But anyway, I didn't mean to go ham on that. I noticed the language you use there, and I would just encourage you to bring that into the present tense, because I can't even think, but you said it like you kind of were like one day, someday, and it's like, bro, that's happening right now. Right now, you're doing it. Yeah, I guess. So talk to me about that, because I'm kind of curious. Yeah, it seems like there's a little like head trash right there. Yeah, yeah. No, it's the person that I am in the current state. I am very, pleased. I love who I am as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a neighbor, as a worker. It's really more about realizing the fruits of your labor. Okay. And what you want those fruits to look like, right? And what the impact of those fruits are going to be. And so it's a journey, right? It's a mission. Like when it comes to fatherhood, right? How do you want your children to end up? What kind of values do you want them to have? And so at 5 and 18 months old, like at the 5-year-old, the values are starting to show, which at times is amazing. At times is kind of scary. Right. So are you saying that, I probably should give this as a disclaimer, the entire purpose of this podcast is to just keep it real, right? Because I want our listeners to see the real battles that happen when you choose a life of significance. Success is one thing, right? You can find success. That's great. But are you pursuing significance? And if you are, you ask for a different set of challenges. You're going through a journey that is most about who you become and who you unbecome in that process, which is mainly unbecoming. I've found it's letting go of things that aren't of my design. One of the things that I hold on very tightly to, that I'm working on, is anger. And it's not like I flip the table and I lose my shit, although I've had those moments, but anger has served me in so many ways. It's made me, it made me a great wrestler. I didn't go out there thinking I'm just here to have fun. I wanted to end the other dudes, and I could harness that. And it was so much anger that I had that I'm like, wait a second, if I apply this to this sport, I can get rewarded for it. I can get celebrated for it. I can get a scholarship for it. They're going to raise my hand in 6 minutes, like this is awesome. Whereas some of my brothers, they did that on the street, you know what I mean? And beat the shit out of people in fights, and things like that. So it's like channeling all of that. And I am like right now in this season of life, like breaking up with anger. And it is like the 5 stages of grief, dude. It is the weirdest thing, like where I'm like, bye, here's your box of shit. Like I wish you well. And I know it lives there forever, but I'm saying that to say that, like, when you say you're not where you want to be, are you talking about finances? Are you talking about the size of your company? Are you talking about the influence you wish you had? Like what's missing in your mind right now?
Yeah, it goes back to what you were just alluding to in terms of significance.
Okay.
Right. And what I would gauge as a significant existence for however long I have here is going to be the contribution I have to the future of my children.
Okay.
And even the contribution I have for my wife in terms of the life that she has, and really being sort of the hero of the family. Yeah. And that's not something that's exclusive to men. I just gave you an example of how my mom was the hero of our family. But I do believe that men have that sort of expectation on them. And we have some gifts where we could really, put to use and be that hero.
Have you heard the clip from Chris Rock about this?
I don't think so.
It's funny as hell. He's talking about the purpose of men.
Okay.
And he's like, it's really, really wise, but it's Chris Rock, so it's funny. And he's pretty much saying that, like, a man's job is to produce, is to provide, is to protect.
Yes.
And if you do not do that, you are worthless. Like that, you have no point. And he says, my grandmother would say, a broke man is like a broke hand. You can't do nothing with it. Yeah. I mean, I was like, damn, that's a good point. Like if you've ever injured yourself, you're like, I can't do anything with this hand, right? So I agree with you, right? Like even in a society where we are trying to deny the difference between men and women, and that it's all fluid and we're all the same. All right, you might lose some listeners here. If you got to go, you got to go. Do what you got to do.
Have a good day. Yeah.
I couldn't disagree more. Yeah. Like if you want to live your lifestyle that way,
yeah,
by all means, do what you want to do. You can be a cat, a fairy, you can pretend like you're a world-renowned podcaster. It might even come true, but more so, there are roles and constructs that were created, in my opinion, world according to Nathan, that are undeniable. And particularly for a man like yourself, like me, if we are not protecting and producing and providing and creating and like constructing, that's where depression sets in. Right? That's where a depressed man is a man that is not building something.
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think the statistics behind, male suicide speak volumes about that point, right? And so
I think that's why people are in the military. Sadly, there's so much suicide. I mean, obviously they've seen horrible things if they've been to war, but I wonder, not qualified to speak to this, but I wonder if it's when they were in the military, they were part of a bigger purpose. They were part of a brotherhood. They were part of a cause, and that gets stripped away because maybe they get discharged due to injury or something. And now they're a civilian in society trying to navigate going, who am I? Why do I exist? And then, we see statistically what happens with that. So I was just curious, like, cause I know exactly how you feel, man. Like over the years, I've thought, this isn't adding up. Like the amount of work that I've put in, the sacrifices that I've made, the relationships that I've built and stayed authentic and genuine and not cut corners. And then I would like log into my bank account and be like, what the, you know what I mean? Or I would look at the size of my company or the amount of whatever. You can measure it in all these weird ways. You can even look at like, your social media analytics or something just like so futile. And it can really have an effect on you. and I think this is where faith comes in, because to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, even when the fruit isn't there, but the root is right.
Yeah.
That's like a brutal season, a brutal process. And I think there's probably a lot of people that can relate to that. So are you saying that you thought you would be further along by now? Or are you saying you're like, tell me a little bit about that, especially because I think I'm 40, I'm 35, I'm 36 soon. And I have some goals around 40, and I had some goals at 32 and 35. And I'm like, I probably won't be there, but I'm just kind of curious what you're actually saying.
Yeah, it's
and I know I'm pressing you. I know I'm leaning in. You can be like, Nathan, piss off.
No, absolutely, man. So I would say, there's some expectations as far as where you want to be at a given point in your life. And I'd say in some areas there's some gaps. Most of the, for most of the story, in terms of like any sort of discomfort with present state versus where I want to be, it's just a matter of time in terms of when these gifts are supposed to, these fruits are supposed to come to the surface. And there's you mentioned your faith as being something that can kind of keep you grounded through that time that you're going through the mission. But then there's also just a level of pragmatism, right, of knowing that nothing worthwhile comes easy. You know what I mean? And it comes with failure too. Before we started filming, I was telling you I saw a really interesting quote, and I'm not sure what statistic it was tied to, but it gave me some encouragement. Cool. Is that the highly successful people in the world fail, even go broke on average 3 times on their way to that success. And so to me, my positivity is able to be sustained even through very difficult times, because I know that this is just a moment in time. Right. And it's like, we've talked about content from Alex Hormozy in the past. He's got a really cool take on it. It's like, a lot of people say, don't worry about what's going on. What nobody will remember in 5 years. And it's like, there's a lot of wisdom there. He takes it a step further and he says, don't worry about things that nobody's going to remember in 500 years. It's like, that's everything. Like, do you know who your grandparents' names from 500 years, 5 generations back? No. And it's like, all this stuff is going to be dust in the wind. So what do you need to focus on here and now? And it's like, to me, that's how my family views me and how my Lord views me. And those are the things that I kind of keep my eye on. And so if I'm missing in any of those places, that's where I see a gap in terms of who I'm supposed to be today.
Dude, isn't it weird how, that's good stuff. How the like the tension that you have to hold between the like how colossal it is that you're existing the way you're existing, doing the things that you're doing, and how futile it is all at the same time. Like, I'll say it sometimes this way to the team. I'll be like, there'll be like a dun 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 moment, like, guys, I think this is it, like dun dun dun, or even if it's negative, it's like, whew, this is rough, or man, this could be huge. And then I'll sort of like lighten the load of it and be like, but if it doesn't work, remember, we're like spinning on a rocket thousands of miles an hour. So, whatever. So it's weird that like that is true, that it won't matter. And yet it completely matters. This is something that I am always humbled by when it comes to my relationship with God, because it can be easy to default to, what is any of this? Why does it even matter? Does God really care about me? I'm one of, billions of people that are currently living, that have lived, that will live. And yet, wait a second, he does care about just me, like uniquely me. And it's the craziest, like, I would call it not tension, but like collision between futility and like significance, right? And how do you own the moment that you're in, whether that, like, for your father was 51 years, or if you get to live till you're 100 years old. It's like, how do you bring that somehow into the present, but plan for the future, recognize the past? I mean, this is all kind of meaning of life stuff, but it's been interesting to me. I've been listening to some of the things that Alex Hormozy says, and I dig him. I had this thought, and I think you'd probably agree with it. I'd be curious to take get your take on it, hot take on it, because You might have seen one of the clips he has where he's talking about how he failed like 8 companies,
9 times, yeah.
9 times, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe it was his 10th company or his 9th company. And I think when people hear that, they might be thinking, oh, well, I've only had 1 company, or I'm on 2 companies. So it's like, do I have to like fail at 4 or 5 more companies or 3 or 3 more companies? Now, I think for him, they happen to be separate entities. But I think when you're looking at your business, like say you had the same entity, the same EIN, and it took you 10 years to break through.
Yeah.
That company will fail 8 to 9 times before it, because there will be so many different versions of it that you think is it. Like you're like, I got the tiger by the tail. Like this is it. And that shit will fail even if the company stays in existence. I mean, whatever version I had of MyCORE like last year failed. Oh, yeah. Like it was failing and I made it right in time. And then now we're like breaking through profitably. So it's like, wait, no, it's the same company. You guys, it says there on your flag, it's been 6 years. No, that thing's failed like 5 times. Yeah. You know, like it's just now profitable and growing. So I just wonder if sometimes like wrestling with failure, wrestling with mistakes, like managing it all, learning from it, but not letting it like consume you, because you'll get like gun shy, right? Like you won't take the same amount of risk. And some of that's good because you're building prudence. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, I want to know about your journey as an entrepreneur. Like, when did you start your company? When did you first go into business for yourself? And then has it just been rainbows and butterflies? I'm sure it's been so easy, easiest thing you've ever done. Of course,
right? Yeah. I'm the outlier, right? Yeah, like, right. Everybody else has it hard. Mine's
everything you do just turns to gold, right?
Yeah, no. So I professionally have spent a little bit more than the last decade in the human capital management space, right? Okay. So that encompasses a variety of HR strategies, throw some payroll in there, benefits administration, really managing what's widely considered your most important asset as an organization. Right. That's your people, right? And ADP, the giant in the payroll space, gave me my first crack at it. Cool. And really learned a ton from that experience. And I wasn't finding joy in my work, but it was well paying.
Nice.
And I felt like that's really what I need to be doing, is earning as much as I possibly could. Okay. But then as you go
what
on,
ages were you at that time?
So that was, that would have been 2013, I think. So about 11 years ago. So it's called 29.
Okay, cool.
Right?
So late 20s, you're working 20s, at ADP.
Yeah. And grinding, doing that thing. Doing my best to learn as much as I could. Not super successful, but hanging around and hitting some numbers, not the big numbers, not blowing it out, but making a decent amount of money for that age, and stayed in the track because again the money was making that make a lot of sense.
Right.
And then it was back in late 2019, I got a phone call from a mentor of mine. And I've been trying to work with this guy for as long as I've been a professional. I love him, and I think he's just an amazing professional and person in general. And the stars finally aligned where we had a chance to work together. He had just taken over a leadership position working at a company that he said was positioning something called international PEO.
Okay.
And I was about to just hang up and said the guy's lost it, because I didn't think that anything like that existed. Right. And so before I hung up, he said, hey, wait a second, let me explain. So he did. And he explained to me that this is very similar to the PEO model that we have here in the States, which is an HR strategy for anybody listening who's not familiar. It allows small and medium-sized businesses to outsource key administrative functions like payroll, benefits, and HR. And then there's some cost savings mechanisms that they deploy when it comes to health insurance and workers' compensation for their clients. And so I knew that world, having worked with ADP and some of their competitors. When he explained to me what the international flavor was, it had the whole outsourcing component to it, but not the cost savings on insurance and workers' comp. So that was a key difference. But I was like, yeah, this is interesting. Essentially what it enabled in that moment in time was companies to be able to engage international talent in a remote environment, which wasn't really a hot thing in late 2019.
This is pre-COVID.
Right? So, but my first day at the company was February 21st of 2020. And I was on my flight back from Austin. I was there at the sales kickoff, learning about the company, meeting everybody in the company. And all the news is starting to surface about this virus that's starting to go around, and people are starting to get worried about it, but not really taking it super seriously. Right. So I get back, and 3 weeks later, COVID's here, and everybody's locked down. And I'm like, I just got hired to this job. Right. They're about to can me. I'm the first guy in. I'm going to be the first guy out. Thankfully, I was not. I got to stick around, and what I experienced was a business boom, the likes of which I've never experienced personally or seen since. And so if the audience can kind of conceptualize this, what our vehicle enabled for companies was the ability to hire remote talent anywhere in the world. When every company in the world had to figure out a remote strategy for an indefinite period of time, we became extremely valuable. Right. And so I saw some of the best successes that I've ever seen as a professional, and that was great. But what was more important was I was more engaged in the work than I'd ever been in any previous stint.
So you were finding depth in the work, and it was connected to what was going on in the world, right?
I had a fire in my belly every morning when I'd get to go to work. And so with that critical moment in our industry's life cycle, a lot of things happened. We started to evolve, and that evolution took the form of new entrants to the market who are bringing some incredible innovation around automation to our business. Automation, as you might imagine, drives down the cost of actually delivering, therefore drives down the price of acquiring it as a client. And so that made it much more accessible to industries that previously would have never thought about engaging international talent. Okay. And the logic behind why these companies were going after global talent was pretty straightforward. It's usually one of two things. One is you can widen your reach to talent the world over. You're not just relying on the individuals who are in your immediate geography to come into your bricks and mortar. You could go into 160 plus countries to find the perfect talent for your organization. And then the second big win was this kind of concept of labor arbitrage, where you could find less expensive talent in other parts of the world, right? And so saw a lot of growth. The industry evolved. I looked at it and I said, this industry is on the verge of popping. Right. And I decided to go independent and become a consultant in the space and advise companies directly in an agnostic way to let them know what the benefits and risks were of hiring global talent. Nice. And how to maximize the benefits while minimizing the risks.
So that was when was that exactly?
That was April 2021.
Cool. So you had a full year with this company in the sort of heyday and hysteria, but all in a positive, up and to the right, massive growth. You're navigating it, you're learning it and recognizing it, and recognizing that, wow, this is it's a whole world, the whole global platform here, landscape, trajectory. And to give context on how we've connected, now you're sitting on an advisory board to help MyCORE go global, right? Yes. To take these homegrown services that we've been implementing on the main streets of America and Canada now, and say, how can we span that to 160 plus countries? That's right. Right. So what a cool experience you had in that year. I'm sure you felt like your hair was on fire, just going through it all. But then that's pretty gutsy in the midst of it to say, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna hang my own shingle. I'm gonna be the master of my own ship. Was there conflict in doing that? Like, did the company go, "What are you doing, dude?" Or tell me about how you sort of navigated that.
Yeah, really no conflict. Okay. And I think the reason why was because I knew them intimately to the point where if I saw an opportunity that was good for them, I was really doing the job that I was doing anyway in placing business. Right. So there was a chance for them to actually continue to profit through our relationship. Right. And so, no conflict at all.
So you and I have this in common a little bit, because when I started MyCORE, I had a 9-year full-time career with a company that is now a partner of ours. Okay. And that company's strength is its culture. I mean, they have an incredible culture. It is sort of cult-like, and it's probably where I learned a lot of my cult-like leading skills. Cheryl, who connected us, has our shield
the tattoo,
tattooed on her arm. Right? Yeah. It wasn't a requirement. It's just she felt led to do it. So it was really difficult for me. It sounds like the company you were with was much more open-minded and kind of open panel, but in 2018, when I was, making this pivot, kind of reinventing myself in the market, repositioning myself, it was very difficult because I had 9 years, had some notoriety within that, did a lot of traveling and speaking, was closely connected to the top tier of the companies, or the top tier leaders of the company. And it was really, really difficult to break free from that without like fully severing. And I didn't want to fully sever because I love the company, love the people, love the product, and was wanting to disrupt the way we brought it to market. So that's kind of cool that you were able to do that and had some autonomy and say like, hey, I'm kind of already out there doing business development, building a reputation for myself. If I can do this as a true advisor and not just say that you're the best because I work for the company, I'm saying you're the best because I know what's out there and you're most of the time the best. And if not, well, may the best company win kind of thing. Right. So you repositioned it and they became like an item on your menu versus you being on the menu with it.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then now fast forward 3 years, you've been living in this space of global, what we call on the profit share side of our house, people ops, people operations.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it was just a fluke or a flare because of COVID. This is a growing industry, isn't it? I mean, didn't you say the total addressable market is like crazy?
It's like 100 billion. It's a billion. To most analysts' projections. There's a couple of players who have captured the majority of the market share. Market share at this point.
Did you say market share?
I did. It's now stuck. You've changed my vocab.
Market share. Yeah.
But in terms of the actual addressable market, analysts believe that anywhere between 20 to 40% even know it exists. So that leaves a lot of opportunity for growth, even as white hot as the industry is. And I think, as a global culture, employees are now demanding either a remote or a hybrid engagement style from their companies. And so the companies that have decided to stay remote, this strategy applies really well for them. And but there's inherent risks. And so that's what we spend our time doing is identifying what those risks are and figuring out ways to navigate them.
Cool. I have a couple what I think would be hard questions for you around this. It maybe not. So I'm just putting you on the spot. But it's actually something that I've been thinking as we're bringing it to life within MyCORE. I'll preface this by saying #America. So I started MyCORE, and we have a phrase we say, MyCORE is made from Main Street. Now, I recognize that the rest of the world also has Main Streets. Yeah. Our mission is to be the world's most people-centric company, not to be America's most people-centric company or Florida's most people-centric company, right? So I've always had this global mindset, but with this like dedication to local.
Sure.
And I wonder how you navigate an objection like, aren't you taking jobs from America?
Yeah.
Or, I have a thought on it and I want to hear your take on it because, I'm interested in how that happens, right? Like, do you just go, I just don't talk to those companies that are too, I don't want to say prideful, but too just like, no, we only do make it in America. Or if there's like something we're missing here on how this actually is a win-win. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not just an objection from clients or detractors or what have you. It's objections that I've had with my own sort of introspective look at my career path, right? Because I share the same sort of values that you just laid out.
Yeah, God and country.
Yeah, for sure. And the realization, if you want to call it a rationalization, you could probably do that too. But it's my truth about this is that ultimately, no matter where you're placing talent, when you place talent, you're growing a business.
Right.
And if you're growing a business, it's kind of that rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
That's going to impact the workers here in the U.S. as well, enrich them, their families, et cetera, and also open up more opportunities as they continue to grow. So to me, that is a wonderful service that we can provide to companies to also impact American families, all over.
That's good. I think that there's like a balance, there's a integration that has to occur in this because, and I think that's where we can help people move in that direction. It's almost like modernization with technology,
Mm-hmm.
but with human capital, because you start small, right? Like, so it's not, okay, let me fire my 27 American based employees and rehire 27 across the world for half the price. It's
Right.
like, I would not do that. Like that's a bad idea. The same way that if we're installing and implementing a modern approach to payroll with a partner like Gusto or Rippling, we know when we assess through the onboarding and the advisory kind of journey that we're not going to like bring them into this modern operation all at once. It's going to take spaced repetition. So we start small and we say, okay, great. Well, let's make sure that like people can get their pay stub in the palm of their hand, or that you send an offer letter this way, or that they onboard, through technology and not on paper. And you would just think that in 2024, like, yeah, of course everyone's doing that. No, the great majority of businesses in this country have not even made that leap, right? And many of them just sort of survived COVID, didn't really necessarily innovate.
Yeah.
The government gave them PPP and PPP 2.0 and EIDL to kind of just maybe not change. And then the world it's a new norm, but it's kind of back for the most part to what it used to be, at least, the way we're socially not distancing. So it probably looks something more like, okay, great. Well, let's look at your margins and let's see if this function could be filled by this person. And not let's just fire this person, but what's their highest and best use of time,
Absolutely.
right? So it's really more about getting that talent that you have US based in a better, maybe even more local, like they could do things right in their community, right in their town that are better than what you're having them kind of be stuck at their home doing because it's so laborsome, or, so is that part of the narrative?
It is. And I would take it a step further. There was a study done last year by a group called the World Economic Forum. And what they projected over the next 10 years is that from a demographic standpoint, you're going to see a massive swinging of the pendulum from where you're going to be able to find talent.
Okay.
So what they're predicting is that in westernized countries, think the US, think Canada, think the UK, Germany, you're going to see a decrease in the amount of working aged individuals by a factor of 200 million people. Okay. And you're going to see an increase in locales throughout Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia, the Asian Pacific region, to the tune of 700 million. So they said, where are the next billion workers coming from? So if you're a US company, what you're faced with over the next 10 years is a skills gap where you don't have the people to fill the roles for your company to grow.
Interesting.
It's not a matter of picking and choosing where you want to hire.
Right.
It's a matter of where you're going to be able to find talent in the first place. And so my company has actually partnered with upskilling institutions in Africa and Latin America, because it's those organizations that are going to level up the talent there to make sure that they can meet the demand, because just from, birth rates in Western countries, it just won't be there. And so
when you say from birth rates, are you saying that, unpack that a little bit, because I don't want to imply anything. I want to know what you mean.
No, just in terms of how many children families have been having over the past 20 odd years, and how many of those children are now growing up and entering the workforce. The trend over the last couple of decades in Western countries, westernized countries, has been such that we are going to see a huge drop off in terms of the amount of people to throw at jobs.
Literally people.
Correct.
That's interesting.
And in the tech sector, it's actually a wider gap than in most others. And that's really where we see a big application of what we do, is trying to find people with the technology skills to develop software, develop applications, things like that.
Wow, man. Thinking the macro on this is just wild. I know Elon Musk said some like radical things about having
more kids,
lots of children, and I think I'm helping out.
We've got 5. Yeah, not bad.
My parents, really helped with 9. But it's so true, right? Because you trend that out. If people are only having 1, 2 children, you give that a generation or two, that has a huge effect on the talent pool, on the amount of people that are educated in a given skill. It's really fascinating to think how the landscape, the world of work is changing, not will change. I mean, that happened, it's just whether you respond to it. And then talk to me about like tangible hands-on companies. So if you're a home services business, obviously somebody in Argentina cannot do the roof in Alabama, but is it like, are you finding that any of the more hands-on businesses within the trades are finding opportunity administratively with this talent as well?
To some degree.
Okay.
It's a lesser degree. I'll be transparent. What you're seeing more in that particular sector is like call center outsourcing, if they have the volume to justify it.
Right.
Because you can find great talent, English speaking talent, English dialects, time zones that really complement where your time zone might be lacking. To keep your business going, around the clock. That's another interesting application, not to deviate from your question, but it's not as common, but when it happens, it's really cool. When you think about like tech companies that are looking to expedite their time to market.
Yeah.
What you have the capability of doing when you take on a global strategy is have a 24-hour production cycle on product. So you could have your team in Silicon Valley or Austin or Miami, wherever they happen to be, when they shut down their day at 8 p.m., you could have, if you have the right standard operating procedures in place, if you have the right comms, you could have a team picking up right where they left off in Vietnam or Australia, right? And it just makes it so that the path to innovation is so much shorter that when you see what the impact of this industry is going to have in terms of what types of technologies and resources and tools that we have, it's going to be, I would put it in the same category as what AI is doing.
Yeah, that's impressive. I've experienced that on a much smaller scale, just with the United States time zone. So a lot of our team is on the West Coast, Vancouver, California, Oregon, and that's newer. Like that was over the past couple years. You've met Curtis and Susan Marie and Ken and Patty. And then even like I mentioned earlier, just the sheer time of the day that Laura starts.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I were to measure, like, when does MyCORE open and when does it close?
Yeah.
Although we don't really have like open and close times.
But when's business getting done? Yeah.
When are things happening?
Absolutely.
Or when do I see messages in Slack? And it's like starting at as early as 4 or 5 in the morning. Laura, really, I mean, she's the only one, and then going into the evening, 9, 10 o'clock at night, Eastern time, because it's 5 or 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And sometimes beyond that, right? Because we're all entrepreneurs kind of spirit wise amongst the group. So I've watched this sort of like 12, 14 hour day. And you can imagine as a founder, I'm like, nice. This is so, but if you could elongate that to essentially around the clock without burning people out, because it's relative to where they are, that path, like you said, to innovation, that go to market, like all those little time frames where you're getting there more readily, that just compounds over time and makes a big difference to whether you break through or not.
Absolutely.
So that's an important gem. Because I lead with who, right? So the way I see it is, if I dig you as a person and it has it makes enough sense to fit into our world, and it's aligned, we'll figure it out. But I just bought into you, so I'm like, if this guy's all about global, let's do it. But now that I'm really kind of learning and we're starting to, like circle up and huddle up and like make this a reality, I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, this isn't just because I think that Pierce is a stud. This actually is like awesome. So I like when those things add up.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool applications, and you just find the right fits based on the industry. We talked about, sort of more Main Street applications with call center talent. We talked about technology. There's applications in higher ed, applications in the nonprofit space, banking, you name it. There's something that can be gained from taking a global perspective, and that's what I helped educate people on and drive them toward, because ultimately that's where I get to see them grow to their max potential. Yeah. And that professionally is my greatest joy. And even personally, like, we talked about like, why were you born? Right. And it's like, I think there's the easy ones of fatherhood and being a good husband, but it's like where I get the most joy out of what I'm doing is where I have somebody who's just going through a challenge, and there's no agenda in terms of, and it happens, right? Like I'm not there to, like, I'll meet with somebody, we'll talk about their business. I'll give them some of the pains that I've gone through to help them sort of avoid them if possible. Right. And it's like, then I go back and I see their business thriving. It's like, that's awesome. Yeah. Right. That is really where I get, my jollies doing what I do.
Right. Yeah. That's cool, man. Yeah. I share that feeling. I love seeing people overcome, break through. I don't get like some weird satisfaction out of people struggling, but my life was full of so much of that I'm one to be intrigued by and interested in, as I said earlier, fascinated by like the arc of that story, right? Mm-hmm. Like meeting people where they're at and seeing, did they progress? Did they digress? And I think a lot of the reasons why people don't progress, if they don't, is they keep changing their story. They keep changing the thing that is the common thread. This lead with who philosophy and core value of MyCORE, there's a lot of application to it, a lot of layers to it, but kind of in the context of what we're speaking about right now, it's like if you go from one company to another company or one industry to another industry, the people in your life should be able to connect those dots, right? They should be able to say, oh, that makes sense. You know what I mean? That's even more dialed in. Or even if, hey, that didn't work out the way you thought it would, you found the gold in it. You found the silver lining and you repurposed it. I think that's beautiful too. Like even in this little studio, like I was really intentional about the way I wanted to set the stage for these types of conversations. And like went on Facebook Marketplace, bought this couch. It's a like real antique. I got this coffee table and sort of like all over town, like pieced together these parts. Yeah. And then it's not all antique. Like that is from Target, for like $80. It looks kind of antique-ish. And this was from Wayfair, I think, So it's like, how do you blend it all together, right? High tech, high touch, local, global, authentic antique, $94 on, Wayfair. Yeah. And I think people want to see both of these things, right? Like this microphone is not from the 50s. It's a brand new microphone, but it's the Elvis mic. And it's like the way, it's kind of that classic, the way you do anything is the way you do everything, right? That kind of the style to it all. Sure. So anyway, I just think that out because as I'm hearing your narrative and learning some of your past and present, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Is there something along the way that made you have a global mindset, like a world event, or maybe you're like, dude, there's just so much damn money in it, like that's okay too. I'm just kind of curious, like what made you start thinking so big? I mean, you can't think much bigger than the globe, than like the world.
Yeah, I'd say the big leaping point for me was being brought into that company by my mentor, and just seeing that this, what the application was, the solution, and then everything that happened with COVID and sort of this embracing of remote work and marrying the two, right? But to me, it did seem like a gold rush type moment. Cool. Just in terms of opportunity and what I have for my family's financial goals, and so. It took a little bit of analysis, but having come from the U.S. side of things and seeing the growth of the PEO market that I explained earlier on, Like that's a 45-year-old industry.
Right.
And it has its own like cool ecosystem around it, including brokers of that solution, where they'll go in and present multiple options to their clients. They'll make a recommendation, and whatever business they place, they get paid off from the vendor.
Yeah.
So like that's going to happen here in this sort of sister industry of the employer of record, right? Yeah. The international flavor of PEO. So I just decided to go out and be the first one of those.
I love that. So you've founded your own firm. Like how it's named. Tell me the naming. Is that your daughter's middle names?
Yeah. So it's had some, kind of all over the grid sort of moments. So it started off as Holland Growth Advisors. Holland is my oldest daughter's middle name.
Okay.
And that was that advisory role and kind of playing broker of solutions. And then I got really aggressive and decided to add technology to the mix. And so this was right when ChatGPT was coming to the scene.
Cool.
And we had access like never before to AI tools. And I realized that I could automate a lot of the advisory I was doing and even the matchmaking I was doing between vendor and client.
Cool. And
so built some technology out, built a partnership marketplace. Nice. That's always been kind of a strong suit.
And that was the initial way that we met.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That was the conversation we were having at that time.
Yeah, you got it. And then not too long after the tech approach launched, I was approached by a really great company within the EOR space called Listo Global.
Yeah.
Salt Lake City based, wonderful team. Worked with them as a partner in the early stages of my business and just really hit it off. And so we talked about the details, and they actually acquired what was rebranded, went from Holland to Magellan.
Okay.
Kind of being a little bit more tech in nature in terms of branding. So they acquired that business and brought me onto the team as part of that transaction.
Okay. So that was like an acqui-hire, as they call it.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. And so I oversaw building out their partnerships division. We created a marketplace there, got some really great relationships built there, and kind of just got the job done in terms of getting the infrastructure for a really powerful partnership division within the organization.
Cool.
And then the entrepreneurial itch started flaring up again. And now it's a lot of the same that we were doing in the early stages. It's branded now as Holland Lane.
Is that your other
second daughter? Her middle name is Lane. Yeah. So just a little reminder of what you're doing this for, right?
That's cool. I love that too, because I'm sure you thought of this, but there's a little like play on words there, whether it's like Main Street or a lane, like Lane. I know it's not spelled that way, but that just sounds like maybe a cool street where there's some business going on, like I just visualize Holland Lane in some town, maybe in Holland, or, it's a stretch, but
no, I'm with you though. I like the naming. I'm too soft to go get a tattoo of my kids' names, so I figured build a business with their names involved. So, but cool. So the only additional element we're doing is we're now looking at kind of complementary businesses like the PEO model and payroll companies that don't have the ability to build or buy a global solution, but they realize they need to because their clients are demanding it, and pairing global providers with them.
Yeah.
And sort of a white label environment where they can go to market turnkey.
Yeah, that's what we're excited about too. I'm going to give some context here to our kind of like presently what we're working on together. It'll be good for the team to hear it that listens in, and also for people that, just wondering what the latest and greatest is. So, right, we found the company. I founded the company with this mission to be the world's most people-centric company. And it has two sort of meanings to it. It's a little bit of a double entendre. One, I was thinking big and thinking global at the time, going, what if we brought this service as a software, as I like to call it, approach, where we're at our core an advisory firm, a Sherpa, a guide, and we're loading it with best-in-class technology, right? And helping people navigate this. Now, you can imagine, it sounds like you probably had a similar aha, but in 2018, when I started the company, people thought I was crazy for this, because they're like, what do you mean you're not going to build tech? Like, I'm like, no, like, why would I build technology? There's so many other companies that are already doing this. I would rather help people navigate through the complexities of all of that. And then fast forward now, coming up on a 6-year anniversary, we've positioned MyCORE to essentially be the thought leader brand, right? That's why this podcast is coming to life, so that we can have these cool conversations with interesting people like yourself that maybe are more tactical and we're talking about a function of our business, or we're talking about the wonders of the universe and the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And, like the episode with Kenya that is going to drop here in a few days. I mean, we didn't talk much about business at all. We just, even though she's our chief brand officer and we do business together daily, it was just about her story. I'm loving having this more tangible conversation about how our organizations are connecting, because we love people, and I wanted to evolve the company into a people operations, people advisory solution. We've now packaged that as Profit Chair, right? Which is sort of sister or brother to Market Chair. And the way that we've sort of labeled them is that Profit Chair is your all-in-one people ops solution. Market Chair is your all-in-one digital marketing solution, both of which were designed for local businesses, right? Main Street companies. So in big picture, I mean, if I could afford you, I would love to have you be our chief global officer and just like go to the hilt with MyCORE, but you're too expensive. So, so we're going to do this through advisory. We're going to do this through partnership, and then, we'll see if we're kind of similar to, like you said, with the acqui-hire. Maybe that's your play. Just keep getting acquired and hired, acquired. But in the meantime, we'll do it in an advisory sense. So what I want to do is sort of globalize Profit Chair, which is a hub and spoke model with really 5 main spokes. First of which is performance management, payroll, benefits, HR, and then profit sharing. And I look at that both as like a menu, but also a flywheel, because I'm a big believer that if people are in the right environment with the right people, they'll flourish. If they aren't, they'll languish. They'll digress versus progress. And then naturally, if they're in that environment and they have the right tools and they're setting their OKRs and they're checking in and they're aligning to the company's goals and they're doing their one-to-ones, and they can do that all in technology and in human interaction, then you're probably going to need to pay them, right? And they're going to need employee benefits, and they're going to need HR. And then if it goes really well, you're going to want to share the wealth and share the profit and have that wheel keep spinning, and that, like you said, ship rising, with all ships rising with the tide. So I'm pretty stoked to see how we can globalize this. One of our kind of claims to fame is that we are all in one, but we're not all or nothing.
Right.
So we're not PEO in that sense, even though we're putting it together. So we're not the employer of record.
Right.
We have partners that can do that, but I'm kind of wondering, like, how you envision, knowing what you know about me, knowing what you know about MyCORE, knowing what you know about Profit Chair, Market Chair. You got to spend a couple days with us in Minneapolis, and we got to hang out with you, which was awesome. And like I mentioned earlier, everyone loved you. We were bummed that you had to leave a day early. We did the photo shoot without you, which was no fun. We're like, you're too good looking to not be in this photo shoot, man. So I'm kind of curious, like, from your point of view, how you imagine MyCORE embracing global and what that type of rollout looks like. Not like, we're plotting out the full strategy. You don't have to give me the blueprint.
No, high level.
Yeah.
It's there's 2 phases of that conversation. There's one, identifying that, like you said, in most countries around the world, there's that sort of Main Street environment, right? That needs the services that you bring to market, right? And so applying this and growing into those markets is going to take a powerful strategy and really strong execution to get there. And so identifying what regions are going to be the most likely to embrace what you're doing is kind of step one in figuring that out. The other side of it is incorporating global services for your existing clients. In the current state, I think it's going to be, for the most part, a reach. But when you look at the partners that you position with your service wraparound, most of them are very scalable.
Right.
And their solutions apply to businesses outside that immediate focal point that you're in right now. So what that tells me is there's actually quite a bit of opportunity, not just on the global side, but on the domestic offering that you have here as well. And so I think MyCORE is poised for growth and scalability. And so this is just another weapon to get you guys there.
I like that. I like how you started that with pretty much saying we're literally going to map it out, right? Like we're going to look on the map and we're going to say, these are hot spots.
Put the little pinpoints.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially younger ones, love the idea of traveling, working from anywhere. How cool would it be to have an awesome employee in a part of the world that you could go visit? You could take your family vacation and be like, good to meet you, right? Or depending on complexities, have them travel to your offsites, So I think like there's a shift that can be made. We talked about it earlier with growing the economy. I mean, entrepreneurs create jobs. That's literally our job.
Yep.
And I don't think people understand that as much. I'm reading a book right now called The E-Myth. It's a classic. It's been around for years. And Ken, our chief relationship officer, he'd bring it up a lot. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go read this book. And I'm probably just 3 or 4 chapters into it. But it's been really eye-opening and confirming. And one of the like punchlines, one of just the things he just keeps coming back to is like, when you decide to be a business owner, you decide to be an entrepreneur, you are no longer doing the thing that your company does. Your number one focus is to create jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And that could be in the sense of like functions, you know what I mean? Like create roles and responsibilities that you're handing off. But I like to even broaden that as in like, man, I am stimulating the economy. Like people have careers at MyCORE because I was crazy enough to start it, you know what I mean? And crazy enough to survive it. And I just want to encourage anyone that's listening, that's maybe at the early stages, somewhere in the middle, has big aspirations. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great, right? Like it doesn't have to be great for you to start, but you do have to start for it to be great. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people sit on the precipice. They get really close. It's what I call 211 degrees, but they don't dial it up another degree. They don't get it to where it changes states into boiling water, not just really hot water, right? Really hot water doesn't do anything. Boiling water cooks. It creates steam. It can move a locomotive. It does some amazing things. It can put a ship across the ocean. Yeah. I don't know that that's how it actually works, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is the analogy that the metaphor rather that is like, hey, maybe you're just 3 feet from gold. Maybe you're just 1 degree from, maybe you're so damn close, but you're still kind of tepid. And I'm hoping that this podcast and conversations like this and people hearing your story can go, you know what? I just need to dial it up a little bit, right? And I think that sometimes people want to do it so much in structure. Oh yeah. Because that seems convenient and routine, but it's freaking chaos. It's organized chaos. So I love how you kept sort of preferencing saying this would be the perfect day. Yeah. Right. This is not every day. This is like, if I get that once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week or 4 times a week, I'm winning. So would you agree that entrepreneurship is pretty damn wild? It's not like just up and down. It's like left and right and up and down and backwards and forward and circular. It's wild.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is absolutely, I'm trying to think of the exact line, but it's from Jerry Maguire when Tom Cruise's character is going off it on Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character saying it is an up and done, soul draining. It's right. And so, it takes a tremendous amount of self-belief to get started. Can't do anything without that critical first step. Right. And then it takes grit to keep going. You mentioned not changing the narrative or your brand. And you're going to get knocked down. It's going to happen. You talked about Hormozy and his 9 failed companies. Like 9 knockdowns is tough to get back up from. But if you have that self-belief in the beginning, that'll provide the foundation for you to continue believing in yourself until you ultimately get there. And I think another thing that would be encouraging to anybody who does decide to go into entrepreneurship is to understand that only 9% of the population in the U.S. are entrepreneurs.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
9%. And out of that 9%, 2% have actual employees. They're not solopreneurs.
Damn, really?
So if you're in that position where people are relying on you for their income, for food on their family's table, you represent 2% of the population. And so
I wondered why I was stressed so much.
Hey, no doubt.
But that's rare air.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so difficult to breathe, and so it's a special thing though, right?
Oh, that's good. I know we're kind of rounding third base here. You had, this is our third episode, conversation. So I'm doing like I do with anything, just course correcting and kind of finding, what is the exact sort of structure and template going to be. I know this, if anyone has gotten this far in this episode, they've already gotten like gems that you and I couldn't even, we would have to go for hours to even talk about like some of the things that you said up to this point that I'm like, oh, he knows exactly what he's talking about. Because my goal with this is to bring people into this studio, on this couch that have their 10,000 hours, that know the nuances, that aren't just regurgitating what they heard on social media or what they read in a book. I'm a big believer that hustle culture that's cool, that's fine, but it's incredibly dangerous because it has a very short-term timeline to it. You cannot sustain that much dopamine and endorphin in your body and brain. You have to fill it with serotonin and oxytocin. And those slow release, high trust, slow burn relationship builders are the things that will sustain you, because you will have days where you quit. And the way I say it, our executive team is 9 strong, including myself. And we were at 7 until last year when Joe, our chief revenue officer, and Kenya, our chief brand officer, came on board. And we say, hey guys, you can quit. We can all quit. We will keep quitting. We just can't quit on the same day.
Yeah.
Right? So, you get Tuesday, you get Wednesday, you get Thursday. So there was 7 of us and there's 7 days. And I'm like, all right, we're transferring this risk even further because now we can go 9 days, and I think that's part of team building. I think that's part of asset building, is that you're really creating a barometer or a bank account for belief. And as a leader, you're going to have to lend out your belief and approve loans interest-free all day, every day. And that's what I do. And then I go find people like you that say, dude, MyCORE's dope. And I'm like, I thought so too, right? And you're like, yeah. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a guy, Brian, that I met in this building. He's now back in Arizona. And we had just had like conversations in passing, like in the kitchen, nothing too serious. But I didn't realize how much of a study he was. I didn't realize how capable he was until yesterday we talked and we got just under the hood. I pulled up our P&L and showed him our numbers from here to, through May 31st. And he was like, that's really good, man. He's like, those margins, the way you're operating it, it's clean. He's got a real kind of COO background, very like process oriented. So we weren't just two dreamers. He was, I could tell he was kind of like wanting to know, are you full of shit or is this for real? Really is what he was asking, and I'm like, let's look, let's take a look.
Tell me,
So I think that leaders, entrepreneurs, they need to be aware of where they're sourcing their belief from, how they're walking by faith. And the Bible says walk by faith, not by sight. It also doesn't say run by faith. It doesn't say crawl by faith. It says walk by faith. So you've got to find this cadence and this sustainability, and you've got to put it into context, right? Because 40 is nothing. You know what I mean? 40 is the new 20. I mean, right?
Doesn't feel like it, but
right. Not in your knees, or your back, but meaning like, I think there's this pressure to have it figured out, to be broken through and to like have arrived by a certain time, when in reality, it's how do you feel right now? And I remind my team all the time, I'm like, guys, like we're happy right now. Yeah. Like we're filled up and saturated right now. Can you imagine if we add like another 10 million to this? Can you imagine if we scale it out to like, so I think like putting it all into the proper sequence of importance, what I call leading with who, and then why, and then what, and then how, and when and where will take care of itself. I think all that matters, and I just sense that you get that you like approach your life and your day, recognizing the past, sourcing from it, being in the present, having an attitude of gratitude, but continuing to look forward to tomorrow and the next day. And I feel like that is significance. Like that's success. That's like the goal. And then if you go off the chart or people write you up in Forbes, awesome. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
But right now, I think we need to find contentment without being complacent. And that's a really difficult tension to be like, yeah. I feel kind of content, but I'm certainly not complacent. So I just was curious if any of that resonated with you.
Oh, it does, especially that last part, contentment versus complacency. And I think that I would say with the kind of self-doubt riddled sort of diatribe that I started with, right. I would say that that's a good characterization of kind of where I find myself now. Okay. Right. Content, but certainly not finished.
Yeah.
Right. Good. So it's like, I have a family that I adore. Right. I love the work that I'm doing. I love the people around me. I feel like I'm in reasonable health. Yep. That's a great place to be. Yeah. But there's just more that I want to do for my family, for myself, and so we'll keep at it.
I think you're doing it, man, and I'm proud to call you a friend and a colleague. And
likewise,
I'm really looking forward to like revisiting these conversations like a year hence.
Yeah.
So it might be like conversation number 003 and then conversation number 33. That we do this again. And we'll check in, we'll check in on how this is going. And it also keeps us accountable, I think, because then you go, okay, we're going to have to talk about this again publicly to more than the few hundred listeners now.
Where we at now. Yeah, exactly.
Right? And I think the people that are in the narrative will go, oh, I remember that episode. I remember that conversation. So very cool, man. I know we could keep jamming for hours, but I just want to thank you for being here. I've got kind of a final question or thought. That's what I was alluding to, but then in good Nathan fashion, little over here, a little over there. So I've been trying on this like potential recurring question for each episode. And it's a play on words for my last name,
Yeah.
I joke sometimes if people are like, you ready? And I'm like, I was born ready, or born this, born that. I've always felt and somehow tricked myself into thinking that I was born to do these things, right? Mm-hmm. That I was like built for this. Yeah. And it is probably a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's also a prophecy that other people have prophesied, like literally. And you kind of touched on it earlier, but do you feel like you're doing right now what you were born to do?
In pursuit of it. Okay. I would say. Doing it, no, and I don't know that I ever will be finished because, I mentioned, parenthood and being a husband and helping other people, but you can break that down even more. Right. And I've tried and I've gone deeper and deeper and deeper. And the foundation that I came to, this is a little bit, probably corny or hokey to some, but is that when it's all done, the words that I hear are, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Amen.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, and I won't know that until it's all over. Yeah. And so that's what I'm born here to do, is to figure out what life looks like in every, pillar of my life, to hear those words.
That's good.
And so it's going to take a lifetime of figuring out, but that's what I'm out to do.
Well, stay at it, man. I'd encourage you in that. I read a book, Anointed for Business, about 7 years ago, right about the time I was founding MyCORE. And it just unlocked something that I needed, which was permission to be in the marketplace fully. C12, I mention a lot. It's the organization that I'm part of for Christian CEOs to be in a peer advisory group.
Yeah.
Kenya and I talk about it because she's in it as a key player. And the premise is what they call BAM. It's a play on like software as a service. It's business as a ministry. So for me, like when I could connect advancing the kingdom of God through the marketplace, I was like, let's go. Right? Because I struggled like, what if I do become really successful? Is it all meaningless because I didn't see out my belief as a Christian and sharing my faith with others? And God has just like opened up doors and created platforms and even like right in this moment, I'm giving God the glory for the things that in my life I've been gifted with and worked my ass off for all at the same time. So yeah, man, just lean into that, because as you keep meditating on that, soul searching on that, you might find like these little connections, these little tie-offs, these little anchors that make you unapologetic in the way that you conquer.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed for me to start like really going after it. I was in my mind playing small up to that point. And then I just like felt like I kind of connected the dots. It's a daily thing, right? It's like a plug in the wall. You can get disconnected. You got to plug back in, but that's really cool, man. So I want to check in on that in our next conversation and be like, hey, do you feel closer to, further away from, more dialed into this, like I was born to do it idea? So good stuff, man. Any other final thoughts, things parting?
Yeah, just an immense amount of gratitude. This was an experience I was looking forward to ever since, you brought it up as a possibility. And I love what you built, what you're continuing to build. Love the opportunity to work with you and the awesome MyCORE team, man. It's just been a real privilege.
Heck yeah, man. Much love.
Love you.
Awesome.